Listen, you rebels, Shimuna Hamorim. With these words, Moses lashes out in anger at the Israelites in the tragic moment where his leadership seems to fail. In Hukkat, the first of this week's double Torah portion, the people of Israel are gathered before Moses and Aaron. Once again, there is no drinking water in the camp. Once again, the people complain, they rant, as they have so many times before. Why did you take us out of Egypt? We will die here. We wish we had died already. God directs Moses and Aaron to take Moshe's rod and in the presence of the community to speak to a rock and order it to yield water. They assemble the people, but Moshe speaks not to the rock, but to them. Listen, you rebels, shall we get water for you out of this rock? He cries. He strikes the rock twice with his staff, and water gushes out. The crisis is averted. But immediately afterwards, God imparts disastrous news to Moses and Aaron. Because you did not affirm my sanctity in the sight of the people, you will not lead this congregation into the land that I have given them. It is a shocking and tragic moment. After all they have done as leaders of this people, Moses and Aaron are now fated not to see the fulfillment of their mission. There is much discussion about God's decision and the source for it. But we also might wonder, what went wrong for Moshe? Why, after decades of strong leadership, he should have faltered? He has shown himself capable, after all, of facing one tough challenge after another. In fact, when faced with rebellion and unrest from the people, Moses has often shown more patience and fortitude than even God. We look closely at the text to see what might be causing this pitch of emotion, this loss of self-control by Moses. And just before the scene at the rock, we read the following. In the first month, the whole Israelite community arrived at the desert at Zin, and they stayed at Kadesh. There Miriam died and was buried. Now there was no water for the community. Miriam has just died, and there is no water. The sages of the Midrash made a connection between those occurrences. They imagined a miraculous well of water that accompanied the Israelites through the wilderness because of the merit of Miriam. And that when she died, there was a return to dry desert conditions. Thus we might infer from the Torah text that during the incident of the rock, as the people converge on him, Moshe was in a state of deep grief. Moses was in mourning for his older sister, and that older sister was a very important figure in his life. Miriam also has lessons to teach us, so let us remember her this week as we read of her death in the Torah. The Torah makes only 6 brief mentions of Miriam, but in each instance she plays a significant role in the life of the Israelites and or in the life of her baby brother. We know that as a young girl she watched over her brother as he floated as an infant in a basket on the Nile to escape the king's death decree. She courageously approaches Pharaoh's daughter and arranges ingeniously that the princess hire a Hebrew nurse for the child, thus returning the infant Moses to his birth mother for his early years. In the Midrash, the rabbis expand further on Miriam's actions. They conjure scenarios in which Miriam and the other women help lift the spirits of the enslaved, beaten down Israelite men. They imagine Miriam as inspiring her father and all of the Israelite men who followed him to continue to live with their wives and to build families, even when they were despairing of the point of it all. Miriam is called a prophet. She is the only woman to be named as such in the Torah. And she is described as a partner of Moses and Aaron in leading the people. At the Red Sea, of course, she leads the women in song and dance with musical instruments. The question arises, asked by Rashi and others, how can it be that on the run from Egypt, in great haste, the women packed musical instruments? Because, he responds, Miriam had faith that they would have cause for celebration, and so she suggested that the women bring along their instruments. In the Torah and in the Midrash, Miriam was a source of hope and affirmation of life. She was a nurturer and redeemer of the people in her own right, and also a nurturer and redeemer of her brother Moses. So in her parsha, perhaps it is not the Israelites' demands that led Moses to lose control of his emotions. Maybe it was his deep grief. The Israelites have lost one of their leaders and their water, and Moses has lost his big sister, who watched over him as a child, stood at his side through years of leadership, and presumably nurtured him as well. It was not only the people who thirsted for the sustaining waters of Miriam's well, it was Moses also. So while it is true that Moses lost his temper and did not obey God precisely at the rock, those details perhaps are secondary to the human drama played out that day. As Rabbi Jonathan Sacks has written, the real story is about Moses, the human being, in an onslaught of grief, vulnerable, exposed, caught in a vortex of emotions, suddenly bereft of the sisterly presence that had been the most important bass note of his life. At times of loss, we all of us are vulnerable. Our emotions are raw and tender. Our world has turned topsy-turvy. At a Jewish burial, I am always moved as we turn the shovel upside down to convey that sense that normal life has been upended. And so it is now for us in this time of COVID-19. We are anxious. We have so many questions that cannot be answered, so many dilemmas which cannot be easily resolved. The world is upside down. Our world is upside down. And when we are raw and vulnerable, it is hard to be patient with others and also with ourselves. We too thirst for the nurture of a Miriam. In order to support one another through these hard times and to sustain our own strength, let us remember and try to cultivate her qualities. Courage against all odds, affirmation of life, and the importance of always valuing life above all else, and the ability to express joy. Let us anticipate celebration as Miriam did. Let us carry our musical instruments with us through these times, with the knowledge and the faith that there are times of celebration to come. Shabbat Shalom.